Hi, I'm Lottie.
And I'm Christian.
And we're Circus District.
Your source for online news, classes, and all things circus in Washington, D.C.
Thanks for being here.
Hey everyone, Christian here to provide your most formal introduction to the Circus District YouTube channel. I want to let you know up front that this video may contain coarse language. It also includes discussions about sexuality and gender identity, which I hope will inspire conversations in your own household. We know that the DMV circus community is kind, loving, and respectful, and we wish to keep it that way on our YouTube channel. If you wish to continue with subtitles, please click the CC button on your video screen right now. With that, please enjoy the video. So hello everyone, and welcome to the Pride Month interview series for the Circus District. We are so happy to have an extremely talented cast of circus humans joining us for these discussions, meant to highlight the multifaceted LGBTQIA+ community of circus artists in the DMV, and to illustrate that pride is not a static concept with one set definition, but means many different things to many different people. And we're here to celebrate that. To give you some background, if you're just meeting us, Circus District is the online circus community in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. We provide a weekly Here and Now roundup of virtual and in-person events. We also publish regular articles on Dispatch, your source for local circus news, academics, book reviews, and more. As you watch these interviews on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, don't forget that we have an actual website, circusdistrict.com, where you can find plenty of local resources and information to help you along on your circus journey. You can contact us by emailing circusdistrict@gmail.com or messaging us on Facebook or Instagram. My name is Christian Klock, and my pronouns are he/him. I started doing circus at age 6 when I learned how to juggle, and have been absolutely amazed by where juggling has taken me since then. I am one of the co-founders of the Circus District, and have been performing and teaching juggling full-time since 2016, and I am celebrating Pride as a gay and queer individual. My guest today is Dorian Bay, who describes himself as a part-time performer and full-time nerd. Dorian fuses pole, rope, feats of strength, and comic book lore into fabulous acts of burlesque, drag, and sideshow. He has appeared in such productions as Atten Burlesque, a burlesque tribute to planet Earth, and Full Frontal Nerdity. He is also a fierce advocate for transgender rights. Dorian joins me today, and I am so grateful to have him. So Dorian, if you just want to share with us today your pronouns, tell us where you grew up and where you're currently based, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. My pronouns are he and him. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm currently based in Northern Virginia.
Wonderful. So we'll get right into the word pride, which I think I sent you this question before, but what does the word pride mean to you? And also how has that word evolved over time?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting question for me, because to me now, pride means kind of strength, resilience, the vibrancy of your chosen family. But I was actually raised very fundamentalist Christian. So for me, growing up, I was taught that pride was a bad thing. And it was actually kind of a process for me to kind of embrace my pride and who I am.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite things that you posted on social media recently was like happy pride and also happy wrath to those who celebrate it. I think
Yes.
that instinctively that kind of meant something to everyone who read it, but as the word pride is very multi-definitional, what did you exactly mean by the word wrath?
Yeah, so for me, wrath is very protective. Like as you know, I'm very much a trans advocate, very much a queer advocate, very much care about kind of like protecting, the marginalized people, that sort of thing. Um, and so for me, it's kind of like putting your money where your mouth is. That doesn't have to be like physically standing up and defending somebody, but like, like not voting for people who are going to hurt them, having the strength to kind of talk to your family and neighbors and call them out on their bad behavior or their bad beliefs.
And you talked about growing up in Florida, which I know a few folks who have grown up in Florida. It's quite a place. And
Yeah.
and this is no offense to any Floridians out there, but talk about what it was like growing up there. Did you have any sort of role models when you were growing up, whether you knew it or not, who were representing LGBTQIA identities?
I really did not, no. Because Jacksonville, Florida, the part I grew up in is very much Southern Florida, to the point where um, our principal tried banning the Confederate flag when I was in middle school, and we had parents outside protesting. And I grew up partially in Jacksonville, and prior to that, I'd come from Colorado. So for me, just kind of this like very like racist Southern pride thing was like very, very blatant because like most white people, I'd kind of absorbed like the under the surface, like white supremacy that every white person grows up with. Um, but I had never seen something quite that blatant. So for me, that was really like kind of shocking. Um, and I was also very much a weird queer kid. Like even back then, I wasn't out as trans. I didn't know what trans was until college. Um, but I always kind of knew like I was not quite like the other girls, quote unquote. Like I had crushes on my female friends and was like, all right, this is all weird. I've got to keep this under my hat, because I was taught that that was something sinful. I was taught that was something to kind of be ashamed of.
And talk a little bit about your journey in performance. And I know it's easy for me to see a lot of these different performers that I'm looking at and find one tagline: aerialist, burlesque, nerd. And so I guess I want to say your journey in burlesque, but just talk a little bit about your performance experience, how you got started on stage.
Yeah. So I actually, the reason I wanted to get into burlesque was because I saw a cosplay burlesque show, which is Halloween's show at Otakon years and years ago. And I just realized that, like, oh my God, like, this is something I could potentially do, And it was just really cool to see like such a big diversity of people on stage, like there were people of all different genders, all different races, all different body types. And I thought like, okay, this is a community I really want to be a part of. So I went to a couple of shows, I talked to people, I got to start kittening, and then it just kind of took off from there.
Nice. We've talked in some of the previous interviews about how when you're on stage, you get to wear this sort of mask, not a mask to protect you from COVID, but a mask of a different person. So what is that experience like, just getting to be on stage and sort of play these different roles, and how has that maybe changed how you perform in your daily life?
Yeah. So I think burlesque kind of provided me with an introduction to a bunch of people I otherwise wouldn't have met. I met a lot of genderqueer and trans people, and so that kind of allowed me to start exploring my own identity. I had sort of gotten to start exploring like my trans side with cosplay because I'd done like quote unquote crossplay sort of things. Got a binder and was like, oh my God, like this feels really natural, like this is me. Um, but part of the reason why I love Nerdlesque so much is because that kind of lets me explore and embody characters, whether they're male, female, something else entirely. And that's kind of a really unique and interesting way to explore and embody a character. It's almost like I think it might have been Scarlett O'Hara, who's a performer from Seattle, said something along the lines of like Nerdlesque is like you're making fanfic on stage. And it's tons of fun.
That's incredible. Yeah, Seattle has a really incredible community, and actually, we profiled some of the performers, including Moscato Estatique, who's an incredible performer who goes by the Them Fatale of burlesque, and is just
Uh,
amazing. So definitely, everybody check it out. Seattle's great, and so is Washington D.C. So, what were some of your favorite characters to play, and how did that sort of like open doors for your evolution as a performer? Because I know when we start out, it can feel very overwhelming for a lot of us to just be up there and it's just a moment and it goes by and you almost don't remember anything that happened. So how has that journey been for you, and what are some of your favorite characters to play?
Yeah, so definitely gonna, show my or wave my geek flag here. But I think my all-time favorite act is I have an act as Midoriya, who's a character from My Hero Academia, like a very popular anime. And that was an act that I was actually able to perform on the Otakon burlesque stage with a DC Girly show. And that was really fantastic because it was kind of like a full circle thing. Like Otakon was where I first encountered burlesque on my first burlesque show. And then like there I was on the stage performing as this character, as a visible trans man. And that was an act that I started working like extremely hard. Like I've always been very like gym motivated sort of thing, like kind of stretching my body to see what it can do. I love doing that. But when I got accepted into that show with that character, I was like, this character is very important to me. Like there's his journey can kind of be seen as a trans analog. Like his story in the anime is essentially like he is a person without powers in a world full of people with powers. But he keeps telling everyone like, I'm going to be a hero. I don't care what it takes. Like I have the drive and the determination sort of thing. And for me, that was like taking testosterone. It was like, oh my God, this is what I needed all along. I kept telling people like, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man. And you don't have to take testosterone or, have surgery or anything to transition. But for me, that was what did it. And that was the click. So for me, like it very much synced up with, like this character getting his powers in the anime, being like, okay, this is me, which is totally geeky of me to say, but it works. So this character was very special to me. I worked very hard on it, and it was just incredible to be a part of that show. So
And I've definitely met circus people who are perhaps even more deep into the nerdy knowledge, particularly about anime. So I feel like if anybody who is watching this wants to challenge Dorian to an anime battle, I would love to see it.
oh no, no, no. I'm not gonna take an anime battle.
Um,
I don't know enough.
I realized actually when I was writing a description of you to introduce you that I was going to write performs strongman acts in shows, and I realized like I took a moment to look at that and went, I don't know how to say feats of strength. I feel like that makes more sense, but what that's coming from is kind of the circus world always has this perception that if somebody's doing feats of strength, it is probably a strongman act, and it's probably a masculine male perspective that is like presenting that. So, how has that experience of performing strongman feats, as we say in the circus world, but also just feats of strength, um, allowed you to see how people perceive that, and also what work needs to be done in terms of allowing many different bodies and identities and all sorts of people to do those sorts of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually not performed feats of strength, or I haven't performed strongman things in a show yet. It's just something I'm learning. And I'm learning that from Babyface Reed, who's up in Pennsylvania. Fantastic guy. Actually, he's in Colorado now. Um,
I had no idea,
but
so he's my neighbor now.
yeah, yeah,
Just
yep.
find him.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh no, great guy. And Alabaster Stone, I think, is there with him as well, and really nice people. But yeah, so I've just been practicing strongman things, but I consider pole and aerials to be feats of strength as well, even though I think the perception is, like you're talking about with like the strongman metal bending. Um, but I totally agree with you. I think there is this perception, even in the word strongman, which I don't like. Like um, one of my partners is very mask looking. Um, but they're actually non-binary. And I see them consistently get misgendered, even in shows, which is very frustrating to me because they'll provide their pronouns ahead of time. They'll talk to the MC, and then it'll be like their anatomy, he, and it's like, well, they're non-binary, and they've explicitly told you, and like, yes, they look one way, but that's their body. That's what they inhabit. So I think there are a lot of assumptions, and it goes the same way with people who are, who present very femme. They'll often get misgendered, called she, her. And I find that a bit frustrating. So I like to kind of play with that. Like one of my a favorite memory is when I got a new PR in the gym, and then on my way home, like I found a thrift store and got a cute little black dress, because clothes don't have a gender.
That's a great story. Um, uh, so what I love is that I was writing sort of your futuristic bio there, like you're working on the feats of
Oh,
strength. They're going
yes,
to
I'm
be there
working on it,
soon.
working
Everybody look out for them.
on it.
I would also encourage anyone to let us know their favorite redefinition of any circus discipline or any discipline that you perform, because I like the idea that aerial could be feats of strength when people are
Yeah, oh,
imagining
it absolutely is.
someone
Yeah,
looking a certain way and on silks or something. And it's like, oh no,
yeah.
I could bend metal while I'm up here if I need to. You talked about
Yeah,
how,
like it takes so
yeah,
much strength.
yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead, sorry.
I'm just consistently amazed. I think because I'm a juggler and I'm so protective of my hands at how people
Uh,
can do
yeah.
that. Yeah. Um, but you talked about people frequently not taking, or I don't want to say not taking people's pronouns seriously, but making the mistake of somebody giving them their pronouns and then later just defaulting to kind of what they see as their pronouns should be. What are maybe some other ways, despite this being a community that's introduced you to so many wonderful people, that the burlesque and nerdlesque and performance and circus community can improve to make space for more people?
Well, how much time do we have? No.
We have, we're going pretty fast, so you have
Uh,
at least a half hour.
so, um, the burlesque, and I'm more familiar, with the burlesque side of things. I've mostly seen like the sideshow component of circus. Um, but as far as the burlesque community goes, I think it has improved dramatically since I first started performing, which was around like 2016, I want to say. And I'd been doing pole and stuff before that. But I think we can always, though, use like a lot more diverse, like um, person of color representation. Because, like there were times when I first started performing when I would be in all white shows. And, that was ignorant. And that was pointed out to me. And it's like I sat with that and thought about it. And I was like, they're right. Like I might not like being criticized, but they're totally right about this. Like we do need more representation. And it's not okay to have a show that's full of like, you know, all white people, and especially all like white femme presenting, that sort of thing, with one body type. So I think we've made improvements, but I think we do have a ways to go with that. Um, and another thing I would like to see as well is in DC in particular, accessibility is such a problem because we have all these, like people who will be like, oh, it's not the performers per se, but you'll have, building owners say like, oh, it's historic. I don't want to add a lift. I don't want to add a ramp, this and that. But we have these like really incredible performers. Like we have like Jacqueline Box, who's up in Baltimore, and like she calls herself a disability babe, which I love. But there's a lot of venues that just she can't perform in because she'll use mobility aids, and it's just they're not accessible to her. They're not accessible to audience members who use mobility aids. And I think we're starting to sort of see people understand that through a lot of work through people like Jacqueline and other people like her. But we still have a ways to go because there's just places in DC that are like up steep flights of stairs. Like maybe if you're deaf or hard of hearing, there's not good line of sight to an interpreter, like that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of improvements we could make with that. I also think um, I would really love to see more trans representation. Something that I'd love to see more kind of like trans-centric shows. There might have been other shows I'm not aware of, but the only trans-centric show I can recall at the moment is the Weirdo Show had a trans and gender non-conforming show, which was great. But I'd really love to see that showcased. And I believe in Texas, in Austin, they're having like Alexander Danger is heading up a trans festival sort of thing. I'd love to see something like that happen more regionally here as well. And I'd especially love to see more trans feminine performers, because I think that can be a hard niche to get into when you're a trans woman, because I think burlesque can be very it can be very hyper femme. It can be very like, if you're just looking at it on the surface and you're thinking like Dita Von Teese and stuff, like you're thinking you have to be perfectly passing, that sort of thing. And that's not everybody's goal. So I think I would love to see, I definitely do see a lot of gender diversity in the burlesque scene in DC, which is part of why I love it so much. But I think we could always use more. And in terms of pole and aerial, after this, I promise I'm done. But I think pole and aerial are so expensive. You know, like there's just such a high bar for entry. Which is why, you know, like right before the pandemic, I ended up getting, you know, I got myself a stage pole. And of course, the pandemic hit, I couldn't take it anywhere. But one of my goals now is like, if I'm in a show and somebody wants to learn some moves on the pole, I am so happy to show them that. Because I feel like you shouldn't have to pay like either 20 bucks a pop or like $100 a month or what have you, just to try the class and see if you like it. So, and those are like on the low end of expensive for you know, pole and aerial. So
Absolutely. And speaking of accessibility, I feel like a few years back I discovered Quest Fest, which is at Gallaudet University. It's like a movement arts festival. And I remember going with my friend who has studied American Sign Language, and it was like opening this whole world that I was like, I had no idea that this festival existed. And that there was such an amazing gem of performance in Washington D.C. And there are a lot of, I feel like, smaller communities like the Weirdo Show, like that I've talked about with other people, where it's like outsiders or people maybe who are only in D.C. 1 or 2 years. Oftentimes, it's like hard for them to find these things, and so it's not. And also the accessibility of the price is another thing, but also sometimes it's just like the knowledge, bringing this knowledge to certain communities that we really want to be involved in, inviting them to be a part of it. What are some of the artists who have really inspired you as a performer? And oftentimes that is related to representation, but perhaps it's also related to how they perform and how they present themselves on stage.
Yeah, so as far as local performers, I am going to sound very trite, but I feel like part of the reason why I love burlesque and performing so much is because I take something away from every show I go to. Like everybody, it's a very rare burlesque show where I don't get something from every performance. And hopefully this won't sound catty, but sometimes people will like the type of people who really rely on looks alone sometimes are the ones who I'm like, all right, you know, like you're very attractive, great job, but you know, like to me there's not a ton of heart there. And there's tons of, you know, like conventionally attractive performers who do bring tons of heart, you know. So I'm not talking about them, but I feel like I would much rather see someone who isn't, you know, somebody who would appear on like an airbrushed magazine cover, you know, who's like polished and practiced this routine until like it's almost, you know, like pitch perfect, and you can tell, you know, this is something they love and care about, versus someone who's just like, hey, I'm pretty, I'm done, you know. So but yeah, no, I take something away from like every show I go to. You know, I feel like I learn something, I see something, like a new way to move I wouldn't have thought of, you know, like a new way to do, you know, like a glove peel, or like a new fastener that I wouldn't have, you know, thought to put on a costume. And in terms of like mainstream performers, you know, I would say Eddie Izzard had a tremendous impact on me, just because she's so polished and she's so proficient and so fucking funny. Sorry, I'm not sure if I can swear.
That's fine.
Okay, so she's so fucking funny, and just she had a line about like calling herself a male tomboy, which really resonated with me, because for a while there, you know, as I was starting to explore my trans identity, I was thinking like, do I have to like go full like Buck Angel, like you God asshole, but like I was like, I don't like what, he represents and a lot of the, like he's just like this full like seems very toxic masculinity sort of, like, and if that is a look you like and you're not taking on his toxic masculinity, that's fine. But for me, I was like, I like pretty things, like I like makeup, I like glitter, like does that mean I'm not a trans guy? But then when I saw, Eddie Izzard, who was kind of coming at it from another direction, and she was talking about like, she enjoys kind of like a rough and tumble, but she also likes makeup. I was like, oh, I guess I don't have to, like conform into this narrow box here. So, and I also really love, there's a Japanese music artist and wrestler, Australian wrestler who now lives in Japan called Ladybeard. And he's just like this incredibly buff weightlifter wrestler dude who does screamo and also wears like these really adorable little Lolita costumes. So I just love the idea of kind of like embracing like gender as being what you want it to be, sort of.
That's incredible. Yeah, one of my favorite things about these interviews is finding out about people who I'm like, oh, I definitely need to check this person out, because that sounds like an experience. And
Oh,
it's
he's
another,
fabulous.
yeah, it's another conversation that I think has been happening a lot in these interviews where, as the a curator of a website that is about circus, I'm often focused on like what circus events are happening, and I'm realizing that the definition of circus can really expand, and it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who dresses up and does screamo has to subscribe that they are circus. But if I feel like it's relevant to our community, then I'm like, great, I will share it, because I feel like most of us
Yeah.
would be like, yes, I would also watch
Yeah.
that.
He is a spectacle and like he embraces it wholeheartedly and he's so positive and upbeat, which is one of the other things I love about him is he's just like it's not like a toxic like you have to be happy all the time positivity, but it's just like, yeah, I'm a huge dude and I like frills and I scream, in a like a oh gosh, what's it called? It's like the same type of thing as like baby metal, which is like this really fun, very Japanese, like it's or it originated in Japan, which is a like a cute screamo kind of aesthetic where you have like really cute Lolita and just like these hardcore screaming vocals and grinding guitars, and it's a blast. So
It makes me think of a Gretsuko, which is the like,
yes,
yeah, okay.
yeah,
We'll maybe
it's
flash up a little
very
image
much in
of
that vein.
that. Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about it. Everything's not always happy, and I feel like, especially in the past year and a half that we've experienced with the global pandemic, it's been a rough time for so many
Yeah.
reasons, and we've dealt with so much grief and pain from so many sources. What has the last um, year plus sort of given you in terms of being a performer, and sort of like what art you want to create when you're coming back, and what kind of a production world that you want to come back to in the burlesque scene?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like I mentioned, I had just gotten my stage pool right before lockdown. So I had the opportunity and I'm very privileged to be able to have space in my home to set up a pole and kind of a studio. So I was able to kind of, even though I wasn't able to take pole classes, I was able to kind of join a lot of like other online communities, learn from people online, that sort of thing. So kind of working on polishing that. Um, and I also learned that there's a lot of really cool things I can do with visual effects and with like video editing and that sort of thing. So that is something I would really like to see coming back. I would love, like perhaps during intermission, perhaps like I don't know, like interspersed in like act one and act two. I would really like to see routines that are kind of digital, like kind of like a hybrid live and virtual shows sort of thing. I know there's venues that have projectors where you can play other people's routines. I just feel like there's some really cool things people have been doing with editing that you can't really do in a live show. So I would love to see more of that. And I also feel like that's a great, like, ideally, I would like everything to be accessible, but I think that is a way to make shows more accessible in a lot of ways. Like, it's a way for people who maybe aren't as plugged into the scene to kind of get their name out there, or to watch things online, kind of like experience things. And it's a way for performers who physically can't be there, whether because of distance or because of, steep stairs or whatever, to show their art as well. So I'd really like to have that.
That's a great point. I've met a lot of students who are very early on in their journey, um, and will often ask that question. Like, maybe there's a school that has a small show that they can perform in, but otherwise they're like, where do I go? Especially if they're just
Yeah.
starting out. And I realized that, like, I had the privilege to be able to start out as a child. And when you're a child, there's lots of things that you can do that people will applaud you for the smallest things. And then when you're an adult, you have this complex where you go, I don't, are they going to like me? Or that even if I just know a little bit, are they going to accept me? Is this going to be okay? And frequently, those are actually some of my favorite performers to watch, because they are learning and growing on stage, and they're also so excited to like share what they have with the world. So that's a really great point, is that we can utilize video and the technology that we've learned. The fact that I even am able to set up a camera and communicate today, I feel like I couldn't have done a year and a half ago. Um, but that's an awesome point. And I was wondering, have you been able to be sort of like a guide for those who are just starting out burlesque or other performance opportunities, to sort of show them the way, and what has that experience been like?
Um, so I don't really think I'm like a burlesque dad or mentor or anything. And honestly, I'm probably not the best mentor. There's far better people out there to learn from. But one thing I do make a point of is I have had people come up to me after shows and ask me, like, hey, I really want to do this. How can I get involved? And so I'll tell them, like, what I did, which was, go to shows, talk to people, like, be willing to kitten, be willing to volunteer as a door person, just kind of put yourself out there and accept that you are not instantly going to be the best performer, and you probably never will be, because there's always going to be somebody better and more talented. But that's not, unless you're in a festival, which festivals aren't really my bag personally. But unless you're in a festival, you're kind of your own competition, basically. Like, we're all competing to be in shows, but at the end of the day, it's just your technique and what can you do, and how happy are you with what you've been doing. So that's kind of like what I try to tell them. I try to give them a fairly, like, I try not to overwhelm them. Like, I won't tell them all, like, I'm not going to tell them you're not going to be the best, because that would be a shitty thing to tell somebody who's just starting out. Um, but I'll just kind of try to let them know how to get involved. I'll let them know, like, hey, like, if you want to talk to me, I'm very easy to find on Facebook. Like, you can message me, and if I hear of a newbie show coming up, I'll totally, point you towards that sort of thing. Because I love getting more people involved in burlesque. I think it's opened so many doors for me. It's, introduced me to the circus community, which, aside from, I feel like pole doesn't super intersect a lot with the circus community, because pole kind of has this, there's a lot of problematic stuff with studio pole, and studio pole has been trying really hard to set itself apart and be like, oh, we're athletic, like, we're just for working out, we're not a sex thing, and I'm like, it doesn't have to be. But if you're shitting on the strippers who perfected pole before you, like, that's not a great thing. So I feel like pole tries to kind of silo itself in certain ways. But aside from burlesque was like my first introduction to sideshow, to circus, to seeing people juggle, like that kind of thing. So
Great. And Gigi Holiday and I had a good conversation about how stripping is absolutely still a hustle, and so is pole dancing, plus stripping,
yeah,
all of those things. So it's still just as building your athletic prowess is a
yeah,
hustle. So, like, respecting all these hustles is super important throughout any conversations that we're having about what is circus,
Yeah,
what belongs, what doesn't belong. And I hope that, yeah,
absolutely.
definitely coming out of the pandemic, a lot of us are asking those questions more before we speak out and say, oh, I know what this is. Because oftentimes,
Yeah,
most of us don't. We don't actually know what the thing is. Um,
exactly. And
yeah.
like then that's one thing that I've learned through burlesque is like anytime I think I know what something is, I probably don't, you know? And if I have a knee-jerk reaction to something, it's probably a good idea for me to pull back from that and just sit and think about that and be like, why, like explore that? Why did I think that? Like why am I feeling that way? Like why did I take that so personally when it wasn't directed at me, sort of thing. So I think it's given me kind of tremendous opportunities for growth, as a person, as a performer, and just to meet so many new people and just learn just a lot I otherwise wouldn't have.
You were talking a little bit about how sort of the preconceived notions of what certain people are supposed to be, whether it's a trans person or a queer person or a gay person, especially once when they come out, you almost feel like you have to have this moment where you just flip a switch and you've become this person, whoever they are, that you've had in your mind or that society has told you exists. So what perhaps is some of your advice for somebody who is just sort of dipping their toe into that, and maybe it's through performance or maybe it's through a conversation with a friend about maybe realizing that their identity can be much more than just this sort of preconceived notion.
Yeah. So for me personally, I believe that you only get one life. Um, so my advice for that person would be if you're in a place where you can safely explore what makes you happy with your expression, then do it. And if you're not in a place where you are safe, uh, I would say try to find allies. Of course, like I'm never going to tell anybody do something that's going to put you in danger. Especially with trans kids, I feel so much for them. I'm so scared for them. So many of them don't have supportive parents. So many of them are in places where like there's laws on the books now that are preventing them from getting like literally life-saving care that they need. Um, but if you feel that someone is a safe person, talk to them. There's resources online you can find. Use incognito if you have to, so your search isn't saved. But there's places for you. There are people you can talk to, whether that's on internet forums, whether that's a friend, but you can find safe people who will accept you. You don't have to fit this stereotypical ideal that you don't want to be accepted. And yes, it will be a struggle. Like there are times, definitely when I'll be wearing a dress and I'll be misgendered. It doesn't happen as often because my shoulders have gotten a lot broader. Um, but it's going to happen. Like it's going to be harder. Like if you're a trans man who has long hair, you're probably going to get misgendered. If you're a butch trans woman or trans femme, you're going to probably get misgendered. But I think it's kind of this calculus of how happy does expressing the way I want to express make me versus everybody else's bullshit, And I don't want to say it's finding your own internal strength because that sounds like I'm victim blaming. And that is, misgendering is not a joke. That feels like shit. It makes like it can derail your whole day. Um, but at the same time, like I think it's important if you can, whether through therapy, whether through meditation, a combination, kind of finding your own internal strength and your own core, figuring out who you are and thinking, this is me. I don't give a damn if somebody is going to tell me I'm not a man, because that's just like your opinion, man. It's like I know internally who and what I am. And if somebody else doesn't believe that, then that's a bit weird because that's like saying, no, gravity isn't a thing. But sure, you do you, you know? So it's kind of learning to kind of respect yourself enough to believe yourself, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Um, and I loved what you talked about in saying, like, I don't want to victim blame. So I feel like to clarify that we're talking about if somebody is fighting through, or almost describing it as a fight is problematic because it's like they shouldn't have to go through this fight because it's just their identity. It's just who they are. We should accept them. But sometimes people will say things, even if they're talking about misogynistic comments directed at women, they'll say things like, "Oh, just don't let that bother you. You're an incredible
Yeah.
person. You can fight through it. We love you. Don't
Yeah.
let those things bother you." And as humans, we all understand that, like, when we hear a certain comment or somebody says something a certain way, or they misgender somebody, or just assume that somebody is heteronormative, um, that has a great impact. And even those small comments that somebody says, no matter how much encouragement we've received up to that point, it can sort of derail everything. So I
Yeah.
love
Well,
that you, yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just gonna say, we're hardwired to look at the negative, like, because that makes perfect sense, from like an evolutionary perspective, because, if good things happen, yay, you survive. Bad things happens, like, oh shit, I better pay attention to that, because that's just how we are. Um, so of course those things are going to stick with you, and it's okay to take time for yourself and to like let yourself feel those. Like, you don't have to just let it roll off you. It's not a bad thing to be negatively affected. It's just a thing, like you were saying. So
Great. Um, so as we sort of thaw out from our homes and reemerge back into live theater, um, what projects are you looking forward to? And these may still be virtual projects that you're doing, or maybe it's in-person stuff that's happening over the summer. And what stuff are you excited about doing personally that maybe isn't necessarily in the works but might be happening sometime?
yeah, so I'm going to be performing with Beltway Burlesque at Otakon again this year, and that is actually going to be my first live show in over a year. So that's exciting and intimidating, but I'm very excited about that. I'm also, keeping everything crossed that people still are smart about things and, don't go out and like lick unvaccinated strangers, like don't eat stuff off the metro floor, that kind of thing. Because there is still, like we're seeing kind of like the emergence of the Delta variant of COVID in the US right now. And so I guess I just want everybody to get their pricks if they haven't. It's good for you. Um, but I'm very much looking forward to performing there. For personal development, as things start to open up, I'm also able to go start taking pole again, which I also wasn't able to do for a while because of lockdown. And my husband is actually somewhat immunocompromised. So, during the height of COVID, I was very, very careful and was like, all right, I'm going to just be careful with this. And there's also the strongman or feat of strength training. I really like that. I'm going to adopt that because I don't
Great.
like strongman. Yeah, it's so I'm going to be doing, and there's also like strongman lifting, right? So it's people get confused by the two of them,
Mhm.
which I feel
They
like
just
should be
see
strong
Schwarzenegger and
person
that's it.
lifting.
Yeah. If
Yeah,
Schwarzenegger can
exactly.
become a trans icon, that would be wonderful. They'll
Yes.
adopt him.
Yeah, but still doing like the feats of strength stuff. And that's something else I'm just working on training and hope to be impressive enough to take that to a live stage someday. So
Great. And this last question could relate it to feats of strength, or it could not entirely. What is one of your favorite meals to cook or eat?
so fortunately my husband does the majority of the cooking because I am very much like a protein bar guy, just because I am not lazy in most aspects of my life, but when it comes to cooking I'm like whatever. But I would say one of my favorite things to eat that he makes is a like he makes this like a personal cast iron pizza. basically, which is like entirely handmade, like makes the dough, makes everything. So that is one of my absolute favorites.
That sounds really delicious. I'm gonna go research that right now. Great. If there's anything like that you would like to add about where people can find you, what's the best way to find out about your performances and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm generally most active on Facebook. As soon as there's a better platform that has the same functionality, though, I'm going to jump ship because fuck suck. Um, but I am Dorian Bay on Facebook. Like I accept most friend requests in network. Like if you're friends of other performers, then that's totally fine. If you're a guy who has like an American flag and wraparound sunglasses and like a MAGA hat or whatever, I'm not going to accept your friend request. I don't know why you're there. But I'm also on Instagram. I'm Dorian-Bay on Instagram. And those are probably the best places to find me.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're looking forward to feats of strength, burlesque, and much more nerdy stuff from Dorian Bay in the future. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good one.